The Gospel according to Luke, chapter 7, verses 1 to 10. Now when he had ended all his sayings in the audience of the people, he entered into Capernaum. And a certain centurion's servant, who was dear unto him, was sick and ready to die. And when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they besought him instantly, saying that he was worthy for whom he should do this, for he loveth our nation, and he hath built us a synagogue. Then Jesus went with them. And when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. Wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee, but say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. For I also am a man set unto authority, having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, Go, and he goeth, and to another, Come, and he cometh, and to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it. When Jesus heard these things, he marvelled at him, and turned him about, and said unto the people that followed him, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And they that were sent, returning to the house, found the servant whole that had been sick. There endeth our reading. Thank you, Lord. Amen. In the previous 4 readings in the Gospel year, we've covered chapter 6 of the Gospel of Luke, in which Jesus called his disciples and chose his 12 apostles, and then delivered the Sermon on the Plain somewhere outside Capernaum. And we've had some discussion about whether the Sermon on the Plain, as described by Luke, is a condensed form of the Sermon on the Mount, which is a much longer sermon in the Gospel of Matthew, covering chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew. Commentators are split on this. My own view, probably with the slight majority of commentators, is that they are 2 different sermons. However, for those who argue that they are recollections of the same sermon, they would point to the fact that both in Matthew and in Luke, on coming down from either the mount or the plain, the flat part of hillside where the Sermon on the Plain occurred, back into Capernaum, there is a healing of the servant of the centurion. And that's indeed the case. In both Gospels, this healing event occurs after the sermon. On the other hand, though, as a counter-argument, the events around this are completely jumbled between the 2 Gospels. So, for example, in Matthew, after the centurion servant is healed, we have the healing of Peter's mother, we have the healing of the man sick of the palsy who's lowered down into the house, and so on. So there is no real consistent ordering between the 2 Gospels, so I think one can't really use this healing of the centurion servant as strong evidence that the 2 sermons are the same sermon. I think it's more likely that, as I said yesterday, the Sermon on the Mount, being so detailed and deep, was really for early disciples of Jesus, whereas the Sermon on the Plain was for a much larger, more heterogeneous audience of both Jews and Gentiles, with simpler, more direct language, but with many of the same themes, of course. In any case, it's all a bit academic. The focus today is now in the beginning of chapter 7. We have this very beautiful example of healing through faith. And this is the healing of a servant of the centurion, and it's also covered in Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 to 13, and we'll be referring to some of the later verses in that Matthew rendition a bit later on. So we learn that Jesus, coming down from the plateau on the hillside where he's delivered that Sermon on the Plain, re-enters Capernaum. And a centurion, who is quite an important personage in Capernaum, as we'll see, has a servant who's very dear to him, who is so sick that he's actually close to death. Essentially, they are almost reading him his last rites, so to speak. And in Matthew it's described that he is sick of the palsy, and so some commentators think he may have had rheumatic fever, was in great pain, and that could be a fatal disorder. Now, the centurion had heard of this great prophet, this great healer, Jesus of Nazareth, and whereas in the Gospel of Matthew it's the centurion himself who comes out of his house and meets Jesus to request his healing, here in Luke he actually sends elders of the Jews on his behalf. And in the translation, it's not the elders of the Jews, it's just elders of the Jews. So it would be some senior Jewish people in Capernaum who would have some degree of distinction and authority. And this is the kind of influence that this centurion has, that he is friends with these more prominent members of the city, beseeching him, begging him that he would come and heal his servant. And the elders beseech Jesus. Now the word instantly here in the Greek actually is a very old-fashioned use of the word instantly. It means earnestly. So they're earnestly beseeching Jesus, saying that this centurion is worthy for the healing, despite not being a Jew himself. He loveth our nation, and he hath built us a synagogue. So this centurion clearly is quite a influential and also quite a sensitive man in terms of living in Capernaum, which is essentially a Jewish city, although not being Jewish himself. And most commentators believe that he would in fact not have been Roman, but possibly Greek or Syrian, because within the Roman Empire the military forces were often made up of non-Romans, and he may also have been what's called a half-proselyte, or a proselyte at the gate. So a proselyte would be a Gentile who is converted to Judaism. A proselyte in righteousness would be someone who converts to Judaism and has also undergone circumcision, and they're sort of in the Jewish faith, whereas a proselyte at the gate is someone who has faith in the Jewish religion but has not been circumcised, and so they're in a sense sort of halfway there. And it may have been for this centurion that he was a proselyte at the gate but did not, as a man and a soldier, want to be circumcised. Maybe that would have been too risky or interfered with his duties too much. But clearly a very sensitive man, clearly a man of great faith, as we shall see. And he has helped the Jews to build a synagogue, either with his own funds or helping them to raise funds from perhaps other Gentiles. Jesus goes with them, and we learn in Matthew that, again, instantly Jesus goes to heal. Now in Matthew, as I say, it's the centurion himself who comes to meet Jesus and says to him, "I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof, but just say the word." And we'll see that same sentiment here. So Jesus is going with the Jewish elders to the house of the centurion when he's met by friends of the centurion who have a message for him. "Lord, trouble not thyself." So the centurion is addressing Jesus as Lord, which is very noteworthy. "Trouble not thyself. I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof." So as a Gentile, I'm not worthy that you, as a great Jewish teacher and healer, should come under my roof. In fact, I'm so unworthy that here in Luke he doesn't come himself. "I'm not even worthy to come unto thee." And one of the commentators points out that in the writings of Augustine, he says, By saying he was unworthy, he showed himself worthy. And there's also this very nice contrast that the Jewish elder said that the centurion is worthy. The centurion says, I am not worthy. And there are beautiful resonances here with actually the gospel, with the sermon that Jesus has just delivered. The meek shall inherit the earth. Be humble to be closer to God. And this centurion is humble. He doesn't believe himself worthy that Jesus should enter his house or even that he should meet with Jesus. But he addresses him as Lord and has faith in him as someone of divine origin. And it is interesting the role of centurions in the Gospels. We can think of the centurion at the cross. Surely this was the Son of God. Centurions often playing a role that is not what one would expect from someone within the Roman army, which was known often for its cruelty and its cold-bloodedness. And we saw that with the Roman soldiers mocking Jesus and, essentially torturing him before his crucifixion. There's another example of a centurion behaving in that way, and that's in the Acts of the Apostles, which is a great instruction actually to Peter, where he actually enters the home of a Gentile centurion who has called to him Cornelius, and this actually opens the door for the apostles to understand the universal nature of the gospel, and that's a story from the book of Acts. But here we come to the faith. This is actually the key part of this passage in both Luke and Matthew. Say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. Wonderful again how we see the word, which is the beginning of the Gospel of John, the power of word, and in Greek, logos, meaning word, but also meaning reason, also meaning creative force. The word, the word W-O-R-D in English has become so weak. We say the pen is mightier than the sword, so we have some recognition of the power of word, but in fact, in the original Greek, it's so much richer, so much more fertile a concept. Say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. Complete faith in Jesus, complete faith. And he gives his rationale. He's not just a man of sensitivity. He's a man, of course, being a centurion, of great authority, has to make decisions every day, has to give very clear instruction to over 100 soldiers. That's quite a big number of people to keep in order, by the way. I'm a man under authority himself, so he has orders from above, and he has under him soldiers. I say to one, go, and he goeth, to another, come, and he cometh, to my servant, do this, and he doeth it. So the life of this centurion is very much based on command, and a command within the military force is absolute. And so he's using that same rationale here, that appealing to Jesus, requesting Jesus earnestly, please just say that my servant will be healed, and that will be sufficient. And we have this gorgeous ending here. Jesus heard these things, he marveled at the centurion, marveled. How often do we see Jesus marveling? I can tell you twice. Once here, and the other example is actually in the Gospel of Mark. And this is when Jesus went to Nazareth, and in Mark chapter 6, let me read verse 5 and 6 for you. And he could there do no mighty work, save that he laid his hands upon a few sick folk and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went round about the villages teaching. In all Gospels we see the very cold reception of Jesus in Nazareth. A prophet is not without honour except in his own city, amongst his own kin, and that's absolutely true. Familiarity can breed contempt. And Jesus marvelled because of their unbelief in Nazareth. Jesus, the Son of God, all-knowing and yet still capable of being surprised at human behaviour, which is reassuring to us because on a daily basis we are surprised at human behaviour, including our own. Jesus here marvelling at the human behaviour of a Gentile, a centurion, whose faith was so profound, he just requested Jesus to say the word to cure his beloved servant. And Jesus turns to the people that are following him, and these would be the Jewish elders. It would be a remnant of the multitude that have heard the sermon. It would be his disciples. And he lets them have it. I say unto you, I have not found so great faith. No, not in Israel. Wow. Everyone would have been rooted to the spot hearing that from Jesus. And if we turn to Matthew, it's a tougher message. Here's what we have in Matthew, and this would be verses 11 to 13 of that passage in Matthew chapter 8. And I say unto you, that many shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said unto the centurion, Go thy way, and as thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. And his servant was healed in the self-same hour. Now those words about the east and the west we do see in Luke much later on, but in Matthew it's following the faith of the centurion. Chilling for the children of God, so to speak, in Israel to hear this from the Messiah. And here in Luke, the friends of the centurion that were sent with the message return home, and they find the servant whole that had been sick. And again, the underlying Greek for whole there is actually convalescing. So the convalescing servant. So the fever has left him, and he's now safe. He's not at risk of death. So this is a beautiful story told in these two Gospels, and is a very early example of the universality of the Gospel, that Jesus here, particularly in the Matthew reading, very clear about the universal nature of his message and the delicate way, ultimately, not delicate right here, but delicate over his ministry, in how he has to somehow bring the lost sheep of Israel with him, while at the same time bringing in those from the Gentile nations. And we see that with the Samaritans. We see it here with this centurion. And we can learn so much from the nuanced way in which Jesus managed to succeed in this, such that his 11 men, his apostles, with the 12th that was added in the Acts of the Apostles, were able to take this example from Jesus and create a universal excitement and joy in the Gospels that continues to this day.